Hey, welcome to my channel. And if you're watching this in the future, this was the first video ever uploaded to the Picky Girl Travels the World YouTube channel. I'm Adelia Borchade. I am the person behind pickygirltravelstheworld.com, a blog about expat life, my expat life. I am also the host of the Picky Girl Travels podcast. I am a financial coach who helps other women do what I did, which is take my little salary and turn it into enough money that now I can work and travel when I want to. If I don't want to work, I don't have to. Today, we're going to talk about how do you find an apartment in Mexico City. I initially moved to Mexico City in 2017. I was taking, I guess, a career break, a gap year, but really that was me trying on retirement. And I went back to work for 2 years and decided that was not for me. So in July of 2020, I retired to Mexico, and one of the first things I needed to do was to find an apartment. I had a little bit of experience looking for my own apartment because when I moved here in 2017, I had to find my own apartment. It's a slightly different process than if you are moving here as part of a job. But if you've got to find your own apartment, this is how you do it. Looking for an apartment in Mexico City is a little different than what we're used to in the US. It is uncommon for you to walk into an apartment building and there be a central leasing office. It's also unusual for you to be able to know that an apartment will be available in advance, okay? So that's the number one difference. You should not look for an apartment sight unseen. You really need to come. This is true of Mexico City as well as Mexico in general. You need to visit the location. You need to walk the neighborhood. One, because the vast majority of rental units never get listed on a website here. Most landlords simply put out a for rent sign in the window and lease their apartments that way. So it's usually you one-on-one directly with the landlord. So that's why you want to walk the neighborhood. Another reason you want to walk the neighborhood is so you can get a feel for it and know, is it going to be someplace that you're comfortable living? People want to know, how much does it cost to rent here in Mexico City? Well, it's less than the US, but it is expensive compared to the rest of the country. Think of Mexico City like you would New York City in the US or London in the UK. Real estate prices are high here. That's why a lot of people have roommates. But if you're like me and you're not about that roommate life, you should budget at least 10,000 pesos, which I think is about $450, $500 to have your own place. There are cheaper units, but you need to be careful and look at the neighborhood. You also need to understand that if they say they are renting a loft, lofts generally are efficiency apartments. They are not lofts in the way that we think of them in the US. If you are willing to have a roommate, there are websites specifically for that. Probably the most widely known one is Data Room, which I will link below. You can go on there and you can search, do you want a male roommate, female, how many roommates do you want, all that kind of stuff. So if you shouldn't book an apartment before you get here, where do you stay when you first move to town? The best thing really is to book an Airbnb. My suggestion is book it for a week first to determine do you really like it, then book it for a month if you need to. It gives you an opportunity to be in a particular neighborhood and understand, how noisy it is, is there construction there? Is it a place that you're going to be comfortable? And I again will remind you not to send anybody money for an apartment that you've seen only online. Don't do it, because that's not going to end well. You always hear real estate agents say it's all about location, location, location. That is very important in Mexico City. Traffic is horrendous here. A little less so now during the pandemic, but you're talking about a city roughly the size of Houston with about 22 million people in it. Traffic is a bitch, okay? So choosing the location that you're going to have your apartment is really important, because are you going to drive? Do you need a parking spot? Where do you work? If you work here, or if you have kids that go to school, how far away is their school from where you live? Because trust me, you don't want to deal with a 2-hour commute each way. And that is very plausible, and that is the reality for a lot of people here. Think about Mexico City like a state, because in essence it is. And the city is divided into 16 alcaldías or delegations. Think of those kind of like counties. So each county or each delegation is then broken down into neighborhoods or colonias. So for instance, I live in the delegation of Benito Juarez, but my neighborhood is Letron Valle. You need to pick a neighborhood based off of where you will be spent. Like if you got to work, you got to go to school, or are you going to need public transit? There are some neighborhoods that are great, but they don't have great access to public transit. And if you're not going to have a car here, living in those neighborhoods might not make a lot of sense. There are some neighborhoods that if you go into the various foreigner, expat Facebook groups and you say, hey, where should I live? There are some very expat, very foreigner heavy neighborhoods that people will suggest to you. I'm not going to shame anybody for choosing to live there if that's what you want your experience to be. But for me, I made a conscious choice not to, because any area that's going to have a lot of foreigners, the cost of living is going to be more expensive. Not only is the rent going to be more expensive, but the tacos will be more expensive. Getting my dog groomed will be more expensive. So if you want to stay in a trendy neighborhood or a neighborhood where there are a lot more foreigners, just know your rent's going to be more expensive. So what are the neighborhoods that I would suggest you look at when you're looking for an apartment in Mexico City? Well, if you want a place where there are a lot more foreigners, the neighborhoods that are popular with them are Polanco, which is a lot like Beverly Hills, Roma Norte, Roma Sur, very trendy, Condesa. Those are areas that are very popular with foreigners, but your cost of living is probably going to be a little higher there. Navarte, that's Navarte Poniente, Navarte Oriente, Navarte Piedad, and Vertiz, is very close to those expat popular areas, but it's a little distance, therefore it's a little cheaper. Has a little bit more of a local vibe. Nápoles, Del Valle, in my neighborhood, Letron Valle, very quiet, more residential, especially if you have kids, you might want to look at Del Valle, Annapolis. Centro, like the main downtown part of the city. If you want that real urban vibe, you want to be where the big historical landmarks are, there are nice places to live in Centro. But there are also some not nice places, so you need to walk the street and look at the place to determine if it's right for you. Now, very close to downtown, there is Juarez, which is another favorite neighborhood of mine, San Rafael, and where I used to live, Santa Maria la Ribera. Those are close to downtown. They're, well, I was gonna say they're not quite gentrified yet, but it depends on what part of them you're in. And then, of course, everybody loves Coyoacan, which is in the southern part of the city. It's like being in a Mexican town, but being in the middle of Mexico City. It's a very, very cool neighborhood. So those are the neighborhoods that if I was a foreigner and I was looking for an apartment in Mexico City, I would check those out. So, are there furnished apartments here? Yes. You can rent apartments furnished. That would be amoblado. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Or unfurnished, which is sin amoblado. You know, that's a personal preference. For me, the apartments that I saw that were furnished did not fit my aesthetic taste. And because we're in a pandemic and I knew I would be spending a lot of time inside, it was very important to me that the inside of my apartment was someplace I wanted to hang out. So I opted to get an unfurnished apartment. I did the math and what furnished apartments were renting for. If I paid that for an entire year, the difference in cost between a furnished apartment and an unfurnished apartment, I could get the major pieces I wanted for less than that. So that's what I opted to do. I opted to get an unfurnished apartment, which then begs the question, where do you get furniture? There's always somebody coming to the city, somebody leaving. So in the various Facebook foreigner groups, somebody is always selling stuff. Like, I got my coffee table, I got this couch on there. So, you know, you can get used things that way. Some people, you know, it's sad. Some people will have only been in the city for a couple of months, but for whatever reason, they have to leave. So they'll be selling their stuff. Best Buy, well, not Best Buy anymore. No more Best Buy. Home Depot, IKEA has an online store right now. Their physical store was supposed to open in January of 2021. If you're watching this from the future, I really hope that that the pandemic has waned some and they've been able to open their physical store. What other stores? There's Sears. Sears here is much nicer than it is in the United States. There are department stores. You can buy furniture on the street. I know that sounds crazy, but things like bookcases, desks, coffee tables, nightstand. You know, you walk through a neighborhood, there's generally a corner where there's at least one carpenter selling stuff like that. Facebook Marketplace, you can buy a lot of things there. And if need be, you can get things made. I had to get my desk made. So furnishing an apartment is not tricky unless, you know, it's the middle of a pandemic and everything closes down. How did I find my apartment? Well, I got here at the end of July. I gave myself 1 week to find an apartment because I was very impatient. So I asked my friends to give me referrals for agents. That didn't go very well. I don't feel like the agents had the motivation to find me a unit that matched what I asked for. It seems as though agents will only show you things that are listed directly with them or with their company. It's not like they can show me somebody else's property and maybe get a cut of the money. It did not work well. The various agents I tried to use kept showing me places that were out of my budget or that weren't very nice. They weren't in the neighborhoods that I had specified that I was willing to live in. And so at the same time that I was using 2 or 3 agents, I was also looking for apartments myself. Now, where can you find apartments? I already told you the number one best way to do that is to walk through the neighborhood. You can also find apartments listed on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, which is where I found this place, and 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that's where I found my other apartment as well. There's a bunch of different sites. I won't go through them all here. I'll list them below. But here's the thing. You do have to be careful when using Craigslist or any of those websites, because I did run into a couple of scams because I was looking everywhere. I had agents looking, I was also on Airbnb, maybe trying to cut a deal with a host to maybe rent outside the platform. So I had all of my bases covered. But I did notice that there would be properties that were listed on Airbnb that would then be listed on these websites. But when I would try and contact people, they, instead of being like, okay, yeah, you can come today and I'll show you the apartment, it would be more like they were trying to get my personal information, and maybe they were going to try and get me to send them some money, but I already told y'all I'm not about that. So that didn't happen. So you do have to be careful. If it looks like a super great deal, like you have been looking in this neighborhood, you know that rent there is 15,000 pesos and this place is only 9,000 pesos, it's probably a scam. What are the requirements to rent an apartment here? It depends. It totally depends on who you're renting from. You do not need residency to rent. I got my first apartment when I was here on a tourist visa. I have seen that happen. That's risky because, as a tourist, you can only stay in the country as long as they allow you. If they don't allow you, you have to leave. So, but yeah, you can rent an apartment on a tourist visa. Now, there were landlords that I talked to that they wanted to see my residency visa, they wanted my passport, they wanted some kind of financial proof that I had money in the bank. Then I have dealt with landlords who literally never asked to see an ID, didn't ask if I had a job or anything. They were just like, okay, here, sign this, and you've got an apartment. So the requirements are going to vary. But one of the things that is common to be asked for here is an aval or a fiador. I think it's because tenants have a lot of rights here. And so once a tenant gets into your property, as a landlord, it may be difficult to get them out if they don't pay rent. So as a result, it's very common for landlords to request you have a fiador, a cosigner. And here's the thing, not only are they asking you for a cosigner, a lot of times they want the cosigner to own property outright in Mexico City. If you're new here and you don't know anybody, that's a very hard thing to come by. So what you can get, there is a special insurance policy that it's usually going to cost a percentage of what the rent is. I think mine was a couple of $100s. I'm going to butcher this Spanish name. Póliza jurídica. I don't know. I'll put the word here so you know what it is. But this insurance policy basically tells the landlord that if you don't pay your rent, they will be able to get that rent, okay? And that policy shouldn't cost you more than a couple of $100. All landlords don't require that. Some landlords will allow you to put down an extra month's deposit, or maybe you pay 3 months rent up front, and then they will waive the requirement of an eval or a fiador or an insurance policy. You know, there are rules here, but everybody is flexible. So, you know, depending on your situation, you just need to find a landlord who is willing to work with you. When you are looking at a place and you're considering renting an apartment, there are a couple of questions that you should probably ask. When they give you the price, and I haven't said this, but maybe you've noticed I've only talked about prices in pesos. If you are dealing with a landlord that is quoting you prices in US dollars, you're probably not getting a great deal. Or the other side of that is that's very beneficial for the landlord. That's not beneficial for you, because if the Mexican peso goes down, your rent stays high instead of fluctuating with the peso, okay? So when they quote you the rent price, you need to ask what is included in that. Does that include maintenance? Many apartments are in buildings where there is like this general fund to cover cleaning, upkeep, security. A lot of landlords pass that price on to the renter. So you need to know, does this price you're quoting, does that include maintenance? If not, how much extra is maintenance? Does your landlord expect you to pay the water bill, the gas bill, the electric? Every now and then you might find somebody who throws in internet, but even if they will pay various utilities, you usually have to get internet yourself. I will also put a side note here. Don't worry about trying to get the water bill in your name or the electricity bill in your name. They don't do that here. The bill generally stays in the owner's name, and that is perfectly acceptable. Even if somebody says, hey, I need proof of your address, give me your electricity bill, your name doesn't need to be on it. Here's another question you need to ask. Is there a boiler or is there a hot water tank? I prefer boilers because I have a constant flow of hot water. If you have a hot water heater, like a hot water tank, how much hot water you have in your shower is completely dependent on the size of your tank. That's why I like boilers. Something else to ask about is, where is the gas? How does the apartment get gas? Is there a gas tank that you will be responsible for keeping tabs on how much is in it and getting it refilled? Or is there a natural gas line coming into the apartment? That's important to know. My apartment does not have a gas tank because I can't be trusted to have to keep track of how much gas is in that tank. So I didn't want that hassle. You want to ask about the age of the building. Is there any earthquake paperwork? Mexico City is prone to earthquakes. I was here in 2017 for the big September quake, and there were fairly new buildings that sustained substantial damage. So being here now and you asking about a building's earthquake paperwork, that shouldn't be weird. Somebody should be able to provide that information to you just so you know that the Civil Protection Agency has, looked over the building and it's safe, that sort of thing. And I guess you're probably wondering, what am I paying for my apartment? I am in I think a pretty nice, solidly middle-class neighborhood. It is primarily residential, but it is located near the trolley bus line and 2 metro lines and a metro bus line. There are some restaurants, there's a park nearby. This is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment, 80 square meters, and my rent is 13,000 pesos a month. That includes maintenance. I do have to pay water, electricity, and gas. My water bill is typically a couple of dollars a month. It's not a whole lot. My biggest expense is probably gas, because I take really long showers, and internet, which I spend about $20, $25, depending on the value of the peso. I can't remember what that word is. This is bigger. Oh yeah, I'm on the 5th floor. I have a balcony off the master bedroom. This apartment is bigger than the apartment I had in the US and cost me about half as much. If you've got any questions about renting an apartment, finding an apartment in Mexico City, or about life in Mexico City at all, leave those in the comments. YouTube will let me know that you commented, and I'll be able to answer it. I'd be more than happy to. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to tell y'all to like the video and subscribe and hit notifications. You know all of that, so go ahead and do it.